I love the 30-second delay. So here we sit on a live stream, watching ourselves. In about a minute, we're going to see what happens.
It usually takes me a good 2 minutes before I find the right posture for the whole.
Right.
Oh,
like,
yeah. I'm like, oh.
Take your shoulder.
Yeah, so I'm making my joke now on the video.
Good. Yeah. And we'll laugh again.
And you're laughing, so I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. So we are now live with another discussion of Depot Biz Chats in our Workonomy Facebook group. We also have a Workonomy group in LinkedIn too, so that's growing. I want to welcome Paul O'Brien and Kristine Bryant from MediaTech Ventures. I've had conversations with everybody that's been here, but I've had many conversations with them. I have like 10 pages of notes. So we're going to pick the best stuff that we've talked about today.
Is that like 8 pages or 2 pages of the notes? Just so we have a little context for how much we're going to go through.
2 pages, but I love
2 pages.
The font's now 8 instead of 12, so I have to squeeze more in there.
Yeah, good. Let's do it.
But we are talking about what a startup hotspot should look like. And we have a live audience coming in right now, so that's really cool. Thanks. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hey, guys.
But yeah, what a startup hotspot should look like. Everyone says their city is a startup hotspot now,
Sure.
right? And everyone tends to believe it. I mean, I did for a while, just thinking, oh yeah, there's more businesses there, so it's a hotspot. And our discussions have kind of gone more concise with the definition of a startup hotspot and what the culture of a city that is considered a hotspot. You know, it's not just employment, it's culture, philosophy, all these things we've talked about. So without further ado, I'd love to have you guys introduce yourselves, what you guys do with MediaTech Ventures in Austin, and we'll move forward.
Sure. After you.
Awesome. So I am the Chief Marketing Officer for MediaTech Ventures. I also own Gladiator Consulting. It's a business planning and marketing strategy implementation firm that I started about 3 years ago, and I've seen a lot of startups in Austin, and one of the things that I'm excited about talking about today is what about Austin might be able to help startups succeed in ways that maybe other places can't.
Well said. Well said. My name is Paul O'Brien, one of the founders of MediaTech Ventures, and we've developed this very unique approach to putting together an organization. Frankly, we've built a holding company to invest in and support and drive more collaboration in order to better support media innovation. And we're doing that because if you really think about it, and hopefully one of the things we'll talk about is that every startup, every small business actually does work in media and technology in some respect, whether it's the advertising that you run, or the website that you build, or the mobile app that you have in place. We're live streaming on Facebook, and that is perhaps the best example of media and technology that we can share. We fundamentally believe that in order to help capital and companies and employers more effectively and efficiently put people to work and put money to work, they have to know how that stuff is changing the economy. We have to know what technology is doing to media. We have to understand the role of the media on behalf of the technology and how it creates a voice for and shares what's going on in an ecosystem. And so we do that primarily through Austin because, as Kristine shared, Austin is one of the best cities in the world for those two things in particular. But we absolutely support that throughout the world with a number of great partners and some other cities that we have in the US.
That's very cool. So how long have you guys been doing this with MediaTech?
It depends on the origin story, right? Like a good superhero movie. It really kind of depends on which version we tell. Most of us have been working in media in some form or fashion for all our careers. I, for example, started at Yahoo back when streaming was called broadcast.com, and it really wasn't considered anything else but this thing that Mark Cuban had built. Technically, we probably started about 3 or 4 years ago when we had some conversations with the state of Texas about what it takes to develop an entire industry. About how Houston is a great example of the oil and gas industry, and Hollywood is a great example of the film industry. Can we not recreate that in other cities? Can we not, from the ground up, figure out whether or not we've got all the right elements of what it takes to support an entire ecosystem and economy? Can we not put that in place and foster that? And from there, We've been validating and testing and building the team and having great partners like Gladiator Consulting join us and adding other cities like LA and Chicago and Denver. And now we're going to start accelerating things in the coming year.
Very cool. So, you were talking about, I just got a comment. I get really, when I see a comment, I'm like, ooh.
We chimed in.
But I wanted to ask, you guys wanted to basically help find the tools for startups, for businesses, and to give them the resources essentially to figure out what makes their business unique in their community, right?
Sure.
So you guys are helping them identify the philosophies and the cultures of a startup culture. You know what I mean? I'm using the word culture too much, but you know what I mean? It's beyond employment rate. It's beyond having how many businesses are popping up, in 2018 or 2017, right? You guys
Sure.
are looking past that. You're trying to grow an industry, like you said, the film industry. So what would you say is Austin's industry in terms of startup culture?
So one of the things that kind of sucked me into MediaTech Ventures was this: why Austin? What is it about Austin? Austin calls itself the live music capital of the world, but artists in Austin are starving. Why is that? Are there tools that they're not leveraging? Are there resources? Are there relationships that we could help that would support the economy of the music industry, the film industry, all of these creative people who are making Austin home and struggling? And so I think one of the things that MediaTech Ventures in particular is doing, but also that the Austin community can do as a whole, is really pull together and find ways to build this industry ecosystem so that Austin can continue to not only be the live music capital of the world, but can maybe also just become a home for creatives of all types where they can thrive.
Mm-hmm. Yep, well said. You touched, Jason, a little bit on tools, finding the tools. And so let's draw a correlation to those thoughts about philosophy.
Okay.
And what we think about when we talk about the philosophy of a city or an ecosystem is directly related to what it takes to develop a culture within a company, in an organization. Mm-hmm. And so this economic development approach that we've got starts not just with a question of, in Austin, for example, what is it that Austin is known for? It's an interesting question, but I don't think it's the most fundamental question. The most fundamental question in figuring out the right corporate culture for a startup city is, what's the shared philosophy? What do we all just kind of believe in and support? And we can all appreciate well that Silicon Valley has a very distinct philosophy that's quite a bit different than a place like Austin. And Austin's philosophy is quite a bit different than a place like New York. Mm-hmm. And that shared philosophy in a company or in a city drives the culture, right? We all kind of believe the same sort of things. So our behavior, things we enjoy, like live music in Austin, is going to reflect that philosophy. When the ecosystem understands those things, it can look backwards then and embrace certain tools and technologies and operating procedures and processes, and it can ask the right questions about how to raise capital. Do we prefer venture capital, or do we prefer bootstrapping? Do we prefer social impact funding, right? When we have those shared philosophies and those shared cultures in an organization or in a city, it drives so many decisions more effectively, because we can look at the audience that's here, we can look at the people who come hang out at Office Depot, we can look at people who are in the incubators in the community, and we can likely find common ground, right? We can likely say, I get it, even though you work in fintech or you work in healthcare and we work in media tech, we at least kind of agree on a lot of the same ideas. Mm-hmm. And it's that kernel that enables us to expose the right tools and share the right tools and collaborate on the right platforms in order to build this culture, in order to build these value propositions that we can then offer to the ecosystem, mm-hmm. And really start to put in place the right things to help build the community. Okay,
so that's a huge task, it sounds like, right? To get everyone to, you're saying everyone naturally thinks somewhat similarly in the same region in terms of a culture, philosophy, starting your business, but not everyone, right?
Sure.
You have people moving in from everywhere, because they heard it's a tech bubble or a hotspot, right? I don't remember the exact numbers, but was it like a year ago and 50,000 people from California came, not to Austin, but to Texas, because I've read tons of headlines saying that Texas is a new startup, state.
Sure.
So how do you manage that? You have all these new perspectives coming in. I mean, that's a positive thing in my opinion when you have new perspectives coming in, but how do you prevent it from basically disrupting the ecosystem that's already in place? If there's a way to control that.
Well, do you want to control it?
Okay.
Right? I think that fundamental shared philosophy starts with that question of whether or not we support, now we're going to get political here and perhaps even national, do we support immigration, right? Is Austin actually comfortable with even intra-country immigration, right? Mm-hmm. That all these people are coming into Austin. And the reason I think that idea of philosophy is so important is that we may not like the growth. We may not be comfortable with the growth because it creates a lot of problems. But I do believe that Austin and Texas is this incredibly friendly and supportive state where we do in fact embrace that immigration. We do welcome all of these people coming here. Because what I've noticed is that most of the people coming here actually share the similar philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. There's a reason they're coming out of Silicon Valley. There's a reason they're coming out of New York. There's a reason people coming into Office Depot are setting off alarms on the way in instead of on the way out, and I'm not sure what that reason is.
He's bringing pens to us.
Bringing things back in,
yeah.
Right? That it's, we certainly have a lot of different beliefs, right? Mm-hmm. In faith, in how to start companies, in whether or not they should be small businesses or disruptive businesses. But at the end of the day, we can design a culture that Austin wants and is willing to support, or that your city wants and is willing to support, when we really just take a step back and say, all right, what do we all kind of agree on, right? What do we all actually want to support? Are we like Silicon Valley? Do we want to be aggressive and disruptive and build the next Google? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? I tend to favor that kind of culture. It's where I spend some time. But when we all share that philosophy, it enables all the other stakeholders in the community, right? The investors and the press, the workforce, the companies, the mayor's office. It enables everybody else to kind of get on the same page. That I got it. That's how we're going to do things here. Yeah. And it's not the same in Denver, and that's okay, because the people who want to live that way are going to go to Denver and build their own kind of startup community that supports the way they think and want to work.
Wow.
So I'm going to chime in because I was born in Austin.
Right.
So you've been here 10 years.
Yep.
I've been here at least 3 times longer than that, but I won't say how
Good
many
way to
more.
put it.
And what I love, and I won't speak for all Austinites because that's not fair, but I will speak as an Austinite because I can claim that. The Austin today is not the same as the Austin 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And, 30 years ago is kind of fuzzy, so I won't say too much about that. But the things that companies are able to do in Austin today, the things that the resources they have, the knowledge available to people here is better because so many people are here.
Sure.
From other places. Those additional perspectives, those additional points of experience that are converging here,
Yep.
in my opinion, make Austin a better place, not just for family and life, but for business.
Yep. I agree entirely. And I agree entirely in the sense that at the same time, Austin is struggling a little bit with our culture, right?
Sure.
We're pushing the live music community further east. We're struggling with what to do with the film industry in Texas because of the film incentives that the state has been wrestling with. And to take those notions outside of Austin, just as an example, think of some other city. Think of Fort Lauderdale. I'm picking one at random. Think of Fort Lauderdale. I think what's exciting about a place like Austin is that we're comfortable enough with the fact that we have these shared philosophies, and therefore we kind of agree on what the culture should be. Kind of agree. And because we kind of agree, it's drawing all these people here, right? We're lifestyle oriented, we support the arts, We like live music. We have big events like South by Southwest and ACL. And that's why I think it's so important to, in developing a startup community, take a step back and start with that question. That philosophy's got to drive some sort of shared culture. Now here's the challenge. Here's where Austin, I think, is making some missteps. And it's that in a company, in a startup, if you use these same ideas, right? Does our team in MediaTech Ventures have a shared philosophy? Yes. Do we have a culture, a business culture because of that? Yes. If you work up from there, the next question then becomes, great, what are your value propositions then? What does that culture offer to your customers or your partners or your community? And it's at that point where Austin's maybe looking at itself and going, I'm not real sure, because we really kind of want to support everybody. But you can't actually support everybody, right? And so if you think of a place like Fort Lauderdale where a startup community may not be as familiar, what's their philosophy for entrepreneurship? I don't know, right? So let's figure that out. Then you can figure out the culture for that city. Mm-hmm. Then you can figure out the value propositions. What are we good at and what are we not good at, right? Austin is good at certain kinds of things and then not very good at certain kind of things. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Silicon Valley is the same way. And you work up from there as a business and as a city, right? Once you figure out what your value propositions are, you can establish your vision. And that's where I would beg the mayor's office in Austin, and that's where I would beg most cities, and I would challenge them as to whether or not they actually have a vision for what the future of the ecosystem looks like. I don't think enough places go that far up to establish a vision of what the city, what the community, what the startup ecosystem, or even a business doesn't do this often enough, what their vision really is in order to accomplish a mission statement, right? A mission statement and a mission that fundamentally never changes. Most companies start at the top and say, our mission is to whatever, right?
Make widgets.
Make widgets, right? And when you deviate from that mission, or when you need to pivot from that mission, most entrepreneurs give up. They go, shoot, that didn't work, right? But if you start at the bottom, you start with this idea, the philosophy, as a city or as a business, you can work your way up to a mission, right? What is Austin's mission? What is Fort Lauderdale's mission as an ecosystem of entrepreneurship? I would love to see each of the innovation officers at the city. I would love to see the chambers. I would love to see the economic development groups within these cities really start with that process and distinguish themselves. Be comfortable saying, Austin's mission for entrepreneurs, Austin's mission for innovators is this. And it's gonna be this thing in particular. And it's okay that that's not the same as the way that they approach entrepreneurship in a place like New York, because we don't work the same way,
right?
And we shouldn't, and we don't want to. That's why so many people are coming here.
Right. That's very cool, and it's a very humanistic thing. You know, people move based on where they feel comfortable, where they feel they're at home.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing for any business, right? Because your business is in someone's home.
Yep. Very
so
true.
you have to treat it as such.
Yep.
I love that. You kind of talked about starting from the bottom up. And, I wanted to see if there was another way to look at it, because we've talked about working backwards too. And I was wondering, is that a similar idea in terms of a business working backwards? I believe you said something, I'm not quoting you, so if I'm wrong, you can tell me I'm wrong. But, most startup founders overlook something really important. And when you said, you got to start backwards, you were talking about marketing.
Sure.
And maybe I'm jumping the gun with this topic, but I was really excited about this topic because marketing is huge.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not doing it, you're not doing it right. Period. So I wanted to talk quickly about marketing and some of the resources and tools that maybe you guys have access to and share, or other. There are other resources that you can, kind of give people ideas. And by the way, there's the camera. By the way, ask your questions, because we have experts here to actually answer your questions about your situation with your business. If you're in Austin, that's even bigger plus, but it doesn't have to be in Austin. We're talking about all startup ideas and startup culture. So
well said.
Yeah.
Chime in. I want to cede the floor, but I will do one more thing since you just did it.
Okay.
Because this is a great way to understand what MediaTech Ventures is trying to do. What I've noticed when most people do a live stream, Office Depot for the future, is that they don't teach the audience what's going on. We did a live stream just yesterday with UT.
Yeah, we did.
And as we kicked off the live stream, we literally looked at the cameras. And so I'm telling you this because this is kind of what MediaTech Ventures do. We want to teach you all how this stuff works. Facebook only shows things to a larger audience. So if you're a small business, Facebook only shows things to a larger audience if there's engagement. If people like it, if people comment, if people share it. And so when you just post something on Facebook, believe it or not many people see it, even if you have thousands of fans. Maybe 100 people will actually even see that until it starts getting engagement. So the trick is, when you post something, get some of your friends, get some of your coworkers to chime in and participate. And when you see a live stream, right now, do it. Click on the like button, click on the share button, push it somewhere else. And yes, jump in with a comment or a question because we're doing this live.
Right.
We'd love to have as many people participate as possible. I'm going to shut up about marketing because we could go on for hours about that topic. Thoughts?
My favorite analogy for the status of marketing with businesses in Austin is that Austin businesses, especially startups, are like teenagers. They think they know what they want to be, and they are never going to listen to anybody else who tells them that getting there might take a different path than the one they're traveling.
Sure.
So they think they know all, and they're real clear about what they want to do, but maybe they didn't revisit the fact that in order to be an astronaut, you probably need a college degree. So is college in your plan? This is how businesses are operating in Austin right now is we know what we want to do. We're going to make a toaster that has 8 buttons and it's going to be blue and everyone's going to buy it because I love blue toasters with 8 buttons. But they skipped the part where they asked other people, do you want a blue toaster with 8 buttons? How about you? Oh, you only want 7 buttons. Okay, which button is not as important to you? Or you hate the color blue, so now I'm gonna have to make blue toasters and pink toasters, and some of them will have 7 buttons and some of them will have 8 buttons. But they skip all of those steps. And so they make their blue toaster with 8 buttons, and only 2 people want it instead of 4. Or 8, or 25, however many they had asked. They could have done marketing beforehand, which is listening, which is asking questions and listening, and reflecting back to people what it is that they want to hear, what it is that they're interested in, what it is that matters to them. The way that you make money is by understanding the market and giving the market what it wants. And so a lot of startups have really great ideas that they don't validate beforehand, and then they get in trouble with where they're going next.
So it's a great point. I wanted to highlight, like, marketing isn't necessarily just putting a promotion out. It's research, right? That was, I think, a really key point that I thought was really important. And I also wrote this down, so I really love that you said it. But like, oftentimes founders look in the mirror and they think that's their demo.
Yep.
And that's very rarely the case, right?
Yep.
I mean, yeah. So,
Well, the reason I want to jump in and share what's going on Facebook is a great example of that. That our streaming this, and this is really important to every single small business and every single founder. Our streaming this right now, our saying share this, is in fact not marketing.
Not marketing.
That is not doing marketing, right? We're promoting the video, we're promoting the stream, and promotion and advertising is not marketing.
Right.
Marketing is listening.
Yep.
Right? And it is very hard to do. It's incredibly difficult to do because most people aren't attuned to, one, figuring out how to do that and where to do that and how to reach enough people and so forth. But 2, most people get really comfortable in what they think is the right answer or the way they want to do it. And what they do is they test and validate. And we've read the Lean Startup book, right? If I just create an MVP of something and put it out there, and if enough people like it, I must be right. Well, that's not marketing. That's called misleading. That's in order to figure out what to build or how to create the startup ecosystem in your city, you do have to collectively listen and figure out what it is that you all want to be supporting and how you all want to work in a way that it's going to create value. It's going to create something that's valuable to the ecosystem that you're in.
Well, and this is the difference between building something innovative that is supported by marketing, because yes, marketing is listening and measuring, or trying to build something based on a crystal ball look into the future. Like, this is innovative and people are going to love it after I build it and then it's going to be amazing. Well, it might be, and it's perfectly understandable if you hope it will be, but you could save yourself a lot of heartache on the front end if you started with a little marketing.
Yep, well said.
And I think this leads us to the next point, because we mentioned resources, using the right resources in your community, in your culture. So I'm going to highlight the information age. That is, that's what we're in right now.
Yeah.
Which, to me means we have access to the most information possible now than we ever have, right? The average, if you have the internet, which hopefully you do, because then, well, you do because you're watching. So you have the internet. You have no excuse.
Have the internet.
But I wanted to touch on that, what the information age means to a startup culture. Like you said, every startup region no one's the same. It's not the same anywhere. But are these resources similar, or is it the same resources, but you're using it differently because you're in a different region? Maybe a curveball of a question, but thought I'd throw that out there.
No, it's a great question. It's certainly the same resources, right? And there is a good question, I think, as to whether or not we're using them and applying them differently, given what we're doing in any city. I'll tell a little bit more of a personal story, because I think it's one of the most important things to appreciate in the distinction between Silicon Valley and New York and a place like Austin. And it's that if we listen and we pay attention to what's been happening in the ecosystem, we can appreciate our strengths and weaknesses. Silicon Valley, for all intents and purposes, built the information age. Right? Outside of the occasional internet company or the occasional piece of hardware somewhere else in the world, essentially everything came out of Palo Alto and San Francisco. And the reason for that is it built upon itself. They built the microwave and radar, which led to the semiconductor. The semiconductor led to a computer. The computer led to people going, I think we can connect these, right? And that led to the internet. And the internet led to folks saying, I wonder if we could do it. Is that going to be a camera? Right? I wonder if we could do that on a small device, right? And so suddenly we have this infrastructure and this culture in which everybody kind of knows what came before it, right? And when the internet came along, AOL said everything needs a keyword. And then Yahoo came along and said, well, that's silly. There are more keywords for every website than just one. Let's create a directory. And none of these ideas were novel. The directory is just the yellow pages. but someone put it on the internet, right? And then Google came along and said, well, that's silly. There aren't just certain places for websites. They could cover everything, right? Point being, everyone there understands those things almost at their core, because they've been working in them for 20 plus years, 30 years. I built my first website in 1994. And it struck me as interesting when I moved to Austin that there was still a massive community of folks here selling how to build a website. And I mean, that struck me because where I came from, everybody kind of knows how to build a website. It's not really rocket science. There's a platform called WP Engine, if we want to talk about tools, right? There's WordPress infrastructure that makes it really easy to build your own website and do it very inexpensively. And so we have to appreciate that between different cities, we may not fully grasp what other folks in other ecosystems grasp. And so I lived in that Silicon Valley bubble where I didn't really see or expect that anywhere else in the world, people didn't know how Google worked. And here we still have a lot of people selling SEO, as that you could actually hire someone to do your SEO, which, by the way, the answer is no. SEO is a very complicated, comprehensive thing that your entire marketing organization needs to be involved with. But here, we still have a lot of people doing SEO. People stopped doing SEO as a thing in California about 10 years ago because folks woke up to the fact that your PR impacts what Google thinks, and your social media impacts what Google thinks, and your customer service team impacts what Google thinks. Now, my point being, it's really important to appreciate this because all of that completely destroyed and disrupted New York and New York's media and advertising and news industries. And that's why we're now wrestling with fake news and social media and all these kind of things that journalists are struggling with. Long story short, right? The notion is that these tools are available to everybody, right? Google, easiest way to appreciate it, is the shining example of this information age. Mm-hmm. You have it, it's free, there's no excuse not to use it. You can even get the analytics platform from Google, which is free, there's no excuse not to use it, right? and when you simply grasp that, not as a tool, but you grasp that as a part of our earlier conversation, you grasp that as a fundamental philosophy of the culture that we're now in, mm-hmm. of the economy that we're now in. You now have, on demand, an answer to every conceivable question you can think of.
Right. How many times has someone said Google it to you?
Google it, right?
That's a cultural phrase.
And so as you're doing market research, as you're listening, right, are you doing that on Facebook? Are you putting stuff out there not to get customers, right? Because Facebook isn't necessarily a good way to advertise, necessarily. But it's a wonderful way to reach people and listen. Are you doing that on Facebook? Are you doing that on Quora, which is a great platform to just ask questions and get feedback, right? This information age has fundamentally changed the way we need to think about our approach to the economy today. Mm-hmm. Period. End of discussion. In the sense that if you're building a small business or you're an entrepreneur starting a company and you don't have these answers or you're not familiar with some of these basic foundational characteristics of the economy today, you're starting out at a massive disadvantage. Massive disadvantage. And it's unfortunate. And that's part of what MediaTech Ventures exists for, is to make sure people know how to leverage these tools, because they aren't just there to use, they're there because that's the way the world works now. Mm-hmm. That's the way the economy works now. It's called the information age for a reason. The information is at your fingertips. Use it, take advantage of it.
I would ask, it's funny because I would ask, is this a trait that we can call stubbornness? For me, like a good example, I am a millennial, and I still have a hard time accepting that I have a Twitter account. And it took me a really long time. I was in a band for 7 years, didn't have a Twitter account. Think about that. I was in a band trying to promote myself, and I didn't have one of the main social media platforms to speak my views or messages on. So now I have one, but I'm like 7 years behind on Twitter. Instagram, Facebook, catch me there, LinkedIn, I'm good. But on Twitter,
sure,
I've missed something. I know I've missed something the last 7 years not using it. So I think that's a great example of that's me just being stubborn and being like, I was a journalist too. So I was very traditional.
Sure.
I hated that idea.
So avoid the stuff that's
right.
disrupting.
Yeah, but what did that do? It just hurt me. It just hurt me.
Sure.
It didn't hurt anybody else. So, and the company as well.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that there's an element of pride there. I don't think that you can start a company without some pride. Like without thinking, I can do this.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Right?
Like you're not going to jump off that cliff knowing that you're going to crash into the rocks at the bottom.
Yep.
But that pride can sometimes lead entrepreneurs to not look at, has somebody done this before? Is somebody else doing this now? And am I jumping into something that is red ocean or blue sky? Mm-hmm. Or can I learn lessons from people who have tried this and didn't succeed? And so it is a huge disadvantage when you don't use that information that's available. And I do think that there is an element of pride there of, I'm going to do this my way. And so you set yourself up for an uphill battle maybe you didn't have to climb.
Right. Well, and a lot of that pride, I think, comes back to your point about marketing and listening. That what astounds me working with a lot of entrepreneurs is when the founders say something like, and I know you've heard this, comment that you have to share the stream, right? Say something like, we're not on Facebook because our customers are not on Facebook.
Oh, God. I've heard that one.
Everybody's on Facebook. We're not tweeting because, for whatever reason. Each of these tools and each of these platforms works in very different ways, right? And if you use MediaTech Ventures as an example, or you use Gladiator Consulting as an example, we use them in different ways, right? What we post on Facebook is not what we put on Twitter, and it's not what we put on Instagram, and because the consumer there is consuming content in very different ways. And so it's important to just appreciate that the information age, these tools, have essentially flipped the person who's in control. And since you're a journalist, you'll get this, right? It's actually flipped who's in control. 20 years ago, the New York Times decided what everybody in New York read and knew, right? And that's why it was so important that it was all the news that's fit to print, or whatever their motto was. But it was factual, because I need you to read the New York Times. This is it. Our word is law. It's what everybody's reading. Well, the internet came along, and control flipped. Right now, the consumer has all of the control. If I want to get my news from Twitter, I get my news from Twitter. Right or wrong, fake news or not, it doesn't matter. That's where I'm getting my news. If I want to get my news from Snapchat, that's where I'm getting my news. And so, as a business person, as a journalist, as a magazine publisher, as a city, if you're not appreciating that and recognizing that your audience is actually now everywhere, you have to speak to them on their terms, right? Listen and do marketing. You have to speak to them on their terms. Otherwise, you literally just don't exist, right? If I'm on Twitter and I'm looking for an app that does a certain thing and your app isn't on Twitter, you simply don't exist, because that's the only place I'm looking for it, right? So figure out how to leverage these tools, because it's not hard. It really isn't hard. You just started one Twitter account. I have 75. I have 75. Why? Lots of different things going on, and that I want to develop an audience in. But the point is, there are tools that make it possible to do that, and those tools are either incredibly inexpensive or often free. And so again, it's the information age. Look on Google. Ask somebody on Facebook how to do this stuff. Ask somebody on Quora. What are these tools that help people do this kind of stuff? Because this information age has democratized that information. It's made it available freely, right? And so you should figure out how to take advantage of these opportunities.
Right. And again, I just want to say this again, MediaTech Ventures helps with that, right? That's kind of one of your guys' main goals, is to get these resources in front of people, or to teach them how to use it or utilize it correctly?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that's certainly one of the main goals. The mission, now if I were to start top down instead of bottoms up, our mission recognizes that capital in any context, public money, venture capital, private equity, angel investors, and even corporate money, Dell's investments as an advertiser, or Warner's investments in hiring people, right? All that takes capital. And the capital in media generally moves very, very inefficiently. Right? We know that music in particular, because musicians are not making very much money. We know that in advertising, because in spite of the fact that print advertising and radio advertising and billboard advertising still works, 80% of all advertising now just goes through Google, because it's easy, right? So we know that media has been very disrupted because of technology. And so we set out as our mission, shared philosophy, but as our mission, to focus on moving that capital more effectively in whatever way it makes sense to do so. If it's working with the city to help move public money, to support whatever is appropriate for that given city, we do that. If it's connecting with the right angel investors or venture capitalists or our global partners to help move capital from other parts of the world into startups, into entrepreneurs, we do that. And if it's working with Capitol Records or Dell in Austin and saying, hey, we can help you do that more effectively and more efficiently, so you're not just throwing money out there to see what happens, we do that. And it's with that passion and that purpose that the technology is tough for the media folks. the creative class, to keep up with. There's no reason to be uncomfortable with that. It is tough to keep up with the pace of innovation.
Right.
And so we can help do that. And then on the flip side, if you're a technology entrepreneur, you have to understand how Facebook works. You really do. If you're the CTO of a company, you have to know what LinkedIn is going to do for your business. You really do, because it matters. And it's not that hard to catch up on that side of things and appreciate that journalism, for example, even still plays a very important role. Are you taking advantage of that as effectively as possible?
Right. I mean, that to me, because I think you mentioned before you were also a former journalist, right? Is that correct?
So I got my start in radio.
Radio.
I'm that old. I'm a little more than the 3 decades, but not much. So I started my career in radio, which is why it was fun to get recruited to Yahoo when they picked up broadcast.com for way too much money, as we all know, because I got into Yahoo in the very late 90s, just as the internet was starting to play with streaming media and what it might mean and what it might do. And I played more of a role on the advertising side of what Yahoo was doing, which was equally fun, right? We were redesigning the homepage of Yahoo with Coca-Cola ads just to take big checks, frankly, and see what would happen. and so I had this blessing of working in the internet as these things that we now take for granted were just getting figured out.
Right. Well, that's very cool. So you kind of saw the breadcrumbs as they were being dropped on the way to creating what we have now.
In hindsight, sure,
Yeah.
right? But at the time, nobody can predict 20 years into
right.
the future what this is all going to look like and how it's going to work. We think it's AR, we think it's blockchain, we think it's AI. Sure, maybe, right? There's a reason why venture capitalists place substantial bets and get equity in businesses, because most of these brainstorms, most of these possibilities don't work out.
And that's another good reason why you should be trying to use all of it.
Yes.
Right? Because if you're using the ones that aren't working and haven't put your eggs in any other baskets, well, you got to find another
You got
basket.
one shot.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So you mentioned creatives, and I wanted to quickly ask, the rise of creatives kind of working for themselves versus working for other people. I am a shining example of that.
Yeah.
I was, sorry. I'm not anymore. But my point is, like, as I was, age 25 and up, and I considered myself a creative, told everybody my desk is messy, creative mind, all that stuff. But my issue was, actually, I don't really know what my issue was. Oh yeah, my thing was that I felt like I should have created something, because anybody I worked for until now just didn't really listen. And I felt like I was trying to come up with innovative ways to market on Facebook or,
Sure.
Do certain things. And this is a great example of, me finding a place that lets me, because we're streaming live on Office Depot. Mm-hmm. But prior to that, man, it takes so much for me to get something that I want to try out there. Mm-hmm. So if you are creative and you're confident in something that you have, now would be the time to branch out on your own and figure out how to create something from it. But don't do it by yourself, right? That's the key. What'd you say?
Don't do it by yourself. I don't know that that's the key.
Oh, okay.
Here's a different way to think about it.
Cool.
I'm terribly enthusiastic about, and I'm going to paraphrase them, so I'm going to misquote them. But both Jack Ma and Mark Cuban, and I think even Mark Zuckerberg has been saying lately that the future of our economy is absolutely not in STEM: science, technology, engineering, math. We don't know what it is. We don't know exactly where it's going to be in, but it is absolutely not simply STEM. And I'm pointing that out in a very different direction than you might be thinking, because, of course, our schools today are all heavily focusing on STEM. Every parent with a kid is saying we need to teach more STEM. And their point, though, is that if you look at the pace of bots and AI and the way in which we have robots now that are writing books and are writing news articles, you can be dang sure there are bots writing code and replacing people who are coders, and certainly replacing people who work in other similar fields. So in the next 20 years or 30 years, that's going to happen at an accelerated pace. Mm-hmm. What's the point? The point is, there's an element of that community that says, no, it's not about STEM. And this is what Jack Ma has been pointing out. It's about what's called STEAM. We have to put STEAM into the economy, and STEAM includes the arts, the creative class. That the one thing bots and machines won't be able to do is remain or be creative, to study history, to understand competition in sports, to understand art. We have bots that are writing music, but can a bot actually put together a musical, right? Could it replace Phantom of the Opera? Maybe someday, but imagine all that goes into producing that kind of an experience. And so we need to be teaching that creative side, whether it's art or music or video or film or advertising, right? It's that artistic side of the ecosystem that's critical. And I'm very passionate about that because, in fact, there are some economists. There's an economist by the name of Richard Florida who's started to study the idea that the reason so much of our workforce is increasingly freelance is because of this. Is because of the fact that if I just need an engineer, I'm going to outsource them. I'm going to hire them overseas. I'm going to hire them on a temp basis, etc. But the person that I need full-time to work in my organization is that person who's creative. Has the technical skill set, to be sure, but they're also creative, that they have this STEAM skill set. And he's referring to them as the creative class. And what he's been studying is that if you think back to the 1800s and early 1900s, we were a working class-based economy. And as we started to mechanize the working class and put robots and automation and so forth in place, we became what was called the service class industry, hospitality, restaurants, travel, tourism, hotels. Right? There's a hotel in every corner for that reason. We became the hospitality industry. And so his point is that now we're going to shift him to what's called this creative class. And the fact that if you don't have, there's a punchline here, if you don't have both the technical skill and the creative skill, if you don't have the tech skill and the media skill, if you don't understand the marketing and the technology as an entrepreneur, you just aren't going to make it. Because what's happening is we're outsourcing one aspect to the other. And so the way to be most effective in the future of the economy is to actually have both of those skill sets in some capacity.
So may I ask, having both skill sets, are you saying like the actual founder should have both skill sets, or should they make sure that their team has those skills? I mean, is there a distinction between your team having those skill sets on your business, or you, the founder, having those skill sets?
I think we're thinking even bigger picture than that.
Yeah.
I think we're talking about, in order for an industry to be successful or an economy to grow, all of those components have to be represented.
Yep.
We're talking about, sure, an individual might need to understand the interplay, but really the concept is, can Austin support startups because we have all of the pieces?
I see.
And it's not just an individual founder trying to put all of it together by themselves.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. I was definitely focusing on that one person. Be like, that's a lot of stuff you're asking that one person to do. You know what I mean?
Well, and if you think of any business, any startup, I would even challenge the notion that there's a founder, or that it works with a founder. Right? You can't name for me any major company that is actually just built by one person. You may think of one person. You may think of Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg alone did not build Facebook, right? That there is almost never one person. And so no, the founder doesn't necessarily need to have all of those skill sets, although as an investor, I would strongly favor that individual who does.
Yes.
But then, frankly, what I think the chief executives, what that primary leader in the startup or startup community needs to do is identify the people who are smarter than them, right? And build a team of leaders who know these things better than they do. Right? If you're that founder, or you're that CEO, or you're the business owner, and you want to be involved in every decision, and you want to drive all the technical decisions, all the sales decisions, all the marketing decisions, I assure you, you're going to fail. Right? Your job is actually to bring in people who know how to do those things better than you do.
Right, exactly.
At least that's what we're doing.
Right.
Get smarter people on board because they know these things better than I do or some of the other founders do. And so let's put them to work
Right.
and have a greater impact because of that.
I mean, I think the quote, I mean, I'm definitely paraphrasing, but you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I mean, I think that rings true. I mean, look, I would love to call myself the smartest person in the room, but that means you want the room to continue learning, to continue growing. If you're at the top, everyone's going to be learning from you when you're not learning from anyone else. So
Yeah.
definitely agree. And that whole expertise thing allows everyone to be good at something.
Yes.
So I love that aspect. So we have gone almost an hour, 50 minutes so far. I wanted to open it up to questions for anybody who's here. If you guys have any questions, now's a great time to ask. If not, I will peruse the comment section and see if there's any questions there.
Sure.
Oh yeah,
Paul,
please.
so you speak a lot about the benefits of the startup ecosystem and for entrepreneurs, it's really vital. I'm wondering if you put much thought into how companies, large companies, can foster a startup culture and ecosystem as well as entrepreneurship.
Yep.
And in terms of like programming that they offer their people or incentives and things like that, have you come across a lot of thoughts about that?
Yeah, great question. For the sake of the mics, I imagine. So we do talk a lot about startup ecosystems in general. And the question has to do with the role that companies can or should play and how they become more entrepreneurial, enabling employees to explore new opportunities and create those cultures that support that. Great question, thank you. In fact, I personally believe it is the critical path for the economy because venture capital in and of itself, right, funding startups, is an entire industry. And it's an entire industry that is big in New York because New York understands the finance side. It's a massive industry in Silicon Valley because they understand the innovation side. And so in your city, in our city, it's important to appreciate that the capital, the wealth, and even the VCs may not quite be as familiar with all of these things that we're doing, right? They may not know these verticals or these industries or how to take these risks as capably or as substantially. Some do, of course, but they may not all know how to do that. And so do we all have to hop on a plane and go to Silicon Valley to raise capital? No. Why can't, kind of where your question is coming from, why can't Disney or Comcast or Office Depot or Dell or IBM, why can't they encourage innovation in a more startup-like way from within? Right? And they used to do that through R&D centers, right? They used to do that with more intentional structured groups where they wanted to control the IP, right? They wanted to make sure that it was theirs. And the challenge in doing it that way is it doesn't really inspire creativity, right? If you give me a little bit of money within a company, sure, I'll experiment with something, I'll do R&D, and I'll see if we can develop some intellectual property for the company. But I don't really own that, right? It's not really something I came up with, it's something we came up with as an employee of this company. So how do you shift it? I believe you can build these startup communities within companies. And we're doing that in the media industry. We've developed hackathons with big companies. We've got an incubator that we put into big companies, media companies. And it's the idea that what we're doing is we're helping diversify innovation risk, right? That if you're a company, entrepreneurship in particular, startups in particular, take the absolute greatest risks of any industry, of any ecosystem, right? These are the people who are willing to do things that will fail, unequivocally will fail, right? Most startups fail. And so a lot of big brands aren't necessarily comfortable with that being a part of their brand, and that's okay, right? They're not necessarily comfortable with things being out there that just don't work. Or in the media industry that are very disruptive to their own industry, right? And so how do you support that? You support that in the same way that a city would. You support it by bringing in third parties, right? By bringing in an incubator, by bringing in a third party who's got some angel money that's interested in that vertical, that industry, so that the entrepreneurs within the company have mentors, have advisors, have connections outside the company, have a curriculum, have access to investors outside the company, so that you're giving them the perception that not only do we want to do this within the organization and within the company, but if it's substantial, we kind of want to encourage that you go build this and you go be successful outside of the company. Companies love external innovation, right? That's why they acquire startups. The same notion. They're acquiring startups because what's happened is they've eliminated the innovation risk until that startup is far enough along that it's worth just acquiring them. So why not create that slight separation within a company? Why not create that slight separation in the company by just bringing in third parties to foster that ecosystem in the same way that the city of Austin, as a company, the city of Austin can't in and of itself create a startup ecosystem, right? You need some companies to support it. You need some incubators to support it. You need mentors to support it, right? You need a lot of outside parties to move into the ecosystem to take on that risk and to bring the experience that they can bring to the table and to expose capital and partners and opportunities so that those entrepreneurs can participate in something. And they do it, the companies do it very simply with light agreements, that essentially say, we are going to remain a part of what we're developing here. And if it works well, we'd love to support it working within or outside the company, depending on the best direction for that idea, for that product. And that way, they're not controlling the intellectual property, right? They're not controlling the patent, but they do have the ability to take advantage of it as the company helping foster it. They're enabling that intellectual property and that patent, which at the end of the day is the entrepreneurs. It really is. Even if it was built within a company, at the end of the day, it really kind of belongs to that person. It's enabling that person to actually do something with it and eliminating some of that risk that they shoulder by taking on those personal risks.
I have a slightly different perspective on that because, huge caveat here, I have done no research, I have no data or statistics to back this up. But I think that companies that are willing to be a safety net for creatives would have a huge competitive advantage. Because while there are creatives and entrepreneurs and people who think innovative thoughts that want to build their thing, there are a lot of people like that who can't afford to quit their day job or
Absolutely.
take the risk on their own. And if you have a company that has a culture of, we will support you while you do this thing that your brain wants you to do, I think that, yes, there might be some risk there, but the rewards might pay off in the sense that maybe you won't have to pay $34 billion to acquire Red Hat.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Great point.
If they had started years ago building that in-house or let their in-house team come up with a solution that would fill that need,
Yep.
would it have cost them less than $34 billion?
Right.
So I think that there's a tremendous competitive advantage to be had if you can find a way to support that entrepreneurship within your organization.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I agree with that entirely.
And that's a topic that I didn't even know we were going to cover. I love that question. And I also wanted to ask, how, this might be an impossible question, how can you convince, you can't just go to any big company and be like, hey, can you cough up some money so some of our guys can start working on things?
Sure.
But, what are you kind of already talked about some of the advantages and some of the competitive edges between both perspectives. But, how do you get a company on board with something like that? Like you said, if you're afraid to put a name out that might fail, that's already associated with a big company. What's the argument to make that risk? Yeah.
There's a huge financial benefit, right? Like, companies have problems that some problems require innovative solutions. How many people are you going to have to hire and pay their salaries, and how long are they going to have to work on it to get to a solution point versus what if I sponsor a hackathon and I present this business challenge that we're facing and I end up with 20 solutions over the course of a weekend, right? That risk reward payoff can be pretty significant.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are ways to show it. Frankly, that when I was at Yahoo, we can look back at Yahoo 15 years later and kind of chuckle that it didn't make it. But Yahoo is still a $1 billion company that for about 5 or 6 years there defined the internet. And it had that. It had that culture, and it had that philosophy that we're going to try things here, we're going to take risks here in early advertising and so forth. Most of those were just brainstorms, right? When Sony came to Yahoo and said, we want to do something creative, we invented it on Yahoo and said, all right, here's what we're going to try and see what happens, right? There's a fundamental philosophy and culture in the organization that supports that. And I think the counterpoint where we sort of disagreed, but I don't think we actually disagree, right? The counterpoint to that is that there are simply then these other companies that don't necessarily have that philosophy and culture, right? And so the notion is that you can bring in other domain expertise, right? You can bring in other folks to the question that we were asked, who do have that philosophy and culture, and they can shoulder some of that risk if your brand as a company isn't as comfortable with it. They can shoulder some of that risk and create opportunities for you within the organization.
Well, and outsourcing ideas is not a new concept.
Right.
I mean, think about back in the 50s, the baking powder company that would have recipe contests,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I mean, people have been soliciting that kind of feedback for decades. That kind of input, that kind of, bring me something new. It's not a new concept, right?
Right. It's just evolved a little bit.
Well, now we have technology to help.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay for a postage stamp.
Right. Just the internet bill. But yeah, aside from that, I mean, I think we've covered something that somebody can study for a good minute. Learn a lot. So I really want to, first of all, I told you I'd say thank you 100 times. I've only said it twice. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I got some of that out of it.
Thank you.
I also want to thank our audience who came in. I appreciate it. We did leave some 20% off coupons in case you want something from here.
Right on.
Up to you guys, no pressure. You can always come back to these chats in our Workonomy Facebook group, our Workonomy LinkedIn group, on our Office Depot Facebook page. But I also know that you can find this chat with you guys too, right? You can tell them where that will live.
Yeah, we'll get it up on MediaTech Ventures.
Okay.
We'll have it on Facebook. We'll write up a perspective or two as well and make sure that we share this on our website. And you can even look up MediaTech Week.
Right, that's we're in the middle of that, right?
We happen to be in the middle of what we call MediaTech Week, and I'm sharing that anecdotally because it's something that we'd like to develop in every city. And so folks, in your neck of the woods, if there's a part of the year where it makes sense to celebrate advertising or film or music or social media, whatever the strength is where you are, we do a pretty good job of getting the word out and connecting the dots between all the creative class professionals. And so that's what we're doing here in Austin this week. We've got events throughout the week, and because we know how Google works, information age, you literally could just look up MediaTech Week and you'll probably see the schedule on Google here in Austin. So I'd love to see you throughout the week, and if not, we'll catch you online later.
Absolutely. And where can they find you? You already said MediaTech.Ventures, right? Is that the website?
Yep, MediaTech.Ventures is the website. MediaTech Vent, because we don't get enough characters on Twitter. You can certainly follow us there. We made the point. We exemplify the point. You could probably find us just about everywhere. We're on Reddit. We're on Quora.
Reddit.
We're on LinkedIn. We're on...
May I ask this personal business question? Do you run all that? Because I know you're very active on social media. So
Sure.
Are you basically handling all these platforms, or do you have somebody helping with that, or are you just kind of crazy with Hootsuite?
No, well, Kristine's Gladiator Consulting organization is brilliant, is just fantastic. And it's a great question because it'd be a good way to wrap that in marketing and listening to what was going on in the ecosystem, trying to figure out how we could develop MediaTech Ventures. We realized that MediaTech is an industry term. It's like saying biotech or fintech. And so it's not really a corporate brand. It's not like saying IBM. It's an industry. It's an ecosystem. And so we, years ago, went out and acquired a couple hundred different versions of that domain and made sure that on social media, everywhere, if you look up MediaTech, it's us. But we did that to make sure that, again, the audience, wherever they are, whatever they're looking for, kind of ends up with us, so that we can steer it a little bit. And yes, then rest assured, there's no way any of that's possible without an incredibly sophisticated way of developing content, understanding how to syndicate that content, get it into email, get it onto Facebook, tweet it, so on and so forth. And there are tools to do it, and to figure out how to put those tools to work most effectively, it takes brilliant people that have experience with it.
Right, and you partnered with people like that.
That's the idea.
That is the idea. So with that, we are going to wrap. Thank you again. Number 7, thank you.
Cheers.
Check out MediaTech Ventures. Check out MediaTech Week. There are a couple really cool, a couple cool awesome events coming up. I know that. And you guys also had one in San Antonio?
So we were in San Antonio yesterday morning, meeting with a couple dozen podcasters, which is a great way to get your city started, by the way. Just kind of raise your hand and say, how many people here are podcasting? Because there's a voice, right? There's a way to connect a bunch of people that are trying to get the word out. So we were down there yesterday morning, connecting some dots with San Antonio, since we're working there too.
Very cool. So you can find them, keep looking here. You can find them pretty much anywhere. Boston, San Antonio. What other cities have you guys connected with? You mentioned Los Angeles, Denver.
Yeah, we've got people in LA, Denver, Chicago, New York, and then we've got a global media initiative, which I'm soft announcing because we haven't really announced it yet. We're getting a bunch of our international partners together in Austin on Thursday, and so we have great relationships with about 16 different countries.
Wow.
Doing the same kind of work.
Very cool.
By design. So we truly intend to be kind of all over the place. We're trying to make sure that media innovation gets funded.
Yes.
And people get to work in this industry. So we're going to do our level best to be everywhere and serve everybody.
I love that. I love what the message you guys are preaching. I love the idea behind, it's not just a business or an industry, it's a community. I think that's the best way to go about it. So thank you, number 9. And hopefully you guys will come back. We'd love to have you guys come back for another chat. Maybe something less about startups and more about technology.
Sure.
We did kind of tease this chat, 2 weeks ago about something you said about how you hate when people say they work in the tech industry.
Yep.
By the way, you can still find that out. You can see that in our Workonomy Facebook group, Workonomy LinkedIn group, and also all of our chats will live on YouTube as well. So you can just turn it on like a podcast and drive and listen. Don't watch while you're driving, just listen. So I appreciate it, guys, and hopefully we'll see you next time for our Workonomy chats.
Thank you,
Have a good one,
Jason.
guys. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank y'all.
guys.
Oh.